Just wanted to make a short video talking about some of the practical principles that lie behind this idea of integrated career learning that I've been talking about. So, just to remind ourselves that career, in the sense that I'm talking about it, is not just about work, it's actually our journey through life, learning, and work. And it's, of course, not a journey that we make alone, but one that we make in combination with other people, and which learning is really at the centre of. One of the things that I'm very keen to talk about is the fact that that journey is increasingly integrated into a range of digital technologies. So the question then is, what is your role in this world where career is important, where career is central to what people need to get out of education, but career is also embedded into the digital world? So what's your role as an educator? Well, let's think of two main roles. The first one is that you're trying to help people to manage their career. That's not your only role, but it's an important role. And the second thing is that you're probably going to want to provide some career support for them using these digital technologies. So if we're going to help people to manage their career, we require some knowledge of the online career environment. We need to know how people's careers are influenced by digital technologies. But we also need new pedagogies to be able to support what we do online. We're not just transferring what we do in the ordinary classroom online. So the important thing here is that the digital, it's both the topic, it's both the knowledge, it's the theme of what you're teaching, and it is also the medium through which you might do at least some of your teaching. So integrated career learning as a concept addresses all of this. So I'm going to set out a few quick principles that might underpin that integrated career learning. The first thing I think is to remember that career is an act of learning. All forms of career guidance and careers education are designed to support individuals to learn more about themselves and the world. And because of that, it fits closely with the educational endeavour. It's part of education. So career learning has a knowledge base that can be taught. It takes place in a cultural context which needs to be acknowledged, and it's fundamentally social in nature, as I've already discussed. We conduct our careers with others. So when we're teaching people about career, we should be drawing on all of the skills and approaches that we already have developed as an educator in whatever subject we're focused on. Second thing is to use instructional design. So instructional design is the basic principle that we think about what's the best way to deliver it. So we never start by thinking, I want to deliver online learning. We always think about what's the situation, who's the learner, how might they best be supported to learn, what tools might be available to them. And in many cases, that will lead you to a decision that this is best dealt with in a classroom or in a workplace. It's best dealt with in perhaps the way you might have taught in the past. But sometimes learners will be at distance. Sometimes they won't be able to get in at the time you're teaching. And that's when you start to explore what is possible through the use of online and digital tools. Our third thing is that we always start with the learner. We think about what the learner needs, what content we want to cover, what kind of pedagogy, how are we going to teach it, what's appropriate. And only at the end of that process, we think about what tools are going to help us to deliver all of this. And that's when we start to look at technologies or to think about how we might use other tools. So a blackboard or a whiteboard, these are tools which we use for learning, just as in another context, Facebook might be a tool that we might deliver for learning. Finally, we take a co-careering approach in our integrated career learning. We're open, we're informal, we're community-based. We try and nudge people rather than to tell them and set out strict rules. We're non-hierarchical, we try and show rather than tell. We model behaviour and we're reflective. We think about what we do and what's working and what isn't working. And this is really important because although there is much to learn about career and there are things that we can do better and that we can draw on theories and facts and evidence for, There's no one way to pursue your career, and there's no one way to interact with our online environment. So the learner has got to discover that alongside you. Now, there are lots of different examples, and if you start to get interested in this, you can find lots of different examples. But I'll just talk through 3 little projects here very briefly. So the first one is the Youth Employability Service in Brighton, where they deliver a lot of their learning through Facebook and social media. They took that principle of focusing on where the learner was at, starting with the learner, and they went to where the tools and technologies that their learners were using, and they used that to deliver their learning service. They found often learners weren't working with them face to face. They wouldn't come into the centre, they wouldn't come and take a class, but they would do stuff online. So that was one example. Another example here, which we've drawn from higher education, is about giving people feedback on their CVs. So a very basic kind of careers function that many careers advisors are involved in doing. But what people found was that when you just send people through emails, you send them feedback, often they don't read it. So in this case, they decided to look at the CV and to talk to the student in much the same way as they would have done if the student had come in. They recorded a audio track to help the student understand what was some of the issues with what they'd done. So that was another way to use technology. In another example, we found that learners were willing to engage in text-based careers advice. They didn't necessarily want to come in and speak to someone, but they wanted to send a query and then people would respond to it. And we got into a process of delivering careers advice through text. Now, each of these tools and each of these approaches will shape what you ultimately can do, but each of them are legitimate. And if we start from the point of view of that instructional design, start from the learner, think about what tools most appropriate, we have some of the best ways in which we can actually go about delivering what we call integrated career learning. There's some references if you want to follow this up to some articles that I've written that discuss some of these issues. But I think let's finish with some key questions. So I think some key questions that you should look at when you're thinking about designing integrated career learning. Start with, where are the learners? What are you trying to achieve with them? What do you want them to know at the end or to be able to do at the end? What are the limits on what you can do? What's the spaces that you've got available? How much time, how much skill have you got? What tools do you have to hand? And then think about, what are you actually going to do with those tools? Many of the online tools can allow you to do many different things. Just as you can use a classroom to teach in many different ways, you can equally use a virtual learning environment or whatever social media you decide to teach in many different ways. And finally, I'd really encourage you to ask that big question, did it actually work? Did it deliver what I wanted? Because one of the important things in the integrated career learning approach is that you are reflexive, you keep developing, you keep thinking, you keep asking questions about what you're doing. Thank you. I've been Tristram Hooley. I hope some of that was of interest, and that's my brief summary of some of the key principles in integrated career learning.